Okay.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk Live. A reminder that this episode will also appear on our podcast, Food Talk with Danny Nierenberg. So please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Today, I get to chat with Sean Pessarra, who is a horticulture specialist for Heifer Ranch, a training farm that is part of Heifer USA in Perryville, Arkansas. Heifer USA is part of the larger organization, Heifer International, which is a nonprofit focused on supporting small farmers across the world. And a lot of the work that we'll talk about today really focuses on what Heifer does to help farmers in the U.S. Before we start, Sean, how are you doing? I know so many people are affected by COVID-19 right now. I hope you and your family are both safe.
Yeah, we're doing well. We're plugging in there and staying busy on the farm, keeping food flowing, homeschooling the kids. Have had to work at home with the kids a little bit, which can be challenging.
Sure. How old are your kids?
6 and 2.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. You have your hands full, to say the least. I think a lot of folks know about Heifer International. They know less about the work that Heifer does in the United States, probably. And so I'm hoping you can just give sort of a brief description of the work you do at Heifer Ranch.
Yeah. So Heifer USA looks a little bit different in terms of a country program compared to the international programs. We are working more with current farmers or soon-to-be farmers or scaling farmers to give them the technical assistance that they need to move more product or increase their livelihood. We also work with a cooperative called Grassroots Meat Cooperative that is able to consolidate a lot of that the meat that is produced by its farmers to cooperatively own the business and then move that to markets across the country. So it really helps them to be able to consolidate purchasing, consolidate processing, things like that. Go ahead.
No, so important when we're talking about meat to have that sort of consolidated. It takes a lot of the risk away for the farmer when you can sort of pull those services together.
Yeah, I mean that's really important for the farmer. It's also really important that that we have more meat processing facilities. And we've seen that, the one facility that processes 5% of the meat, if that shuts down, which has happened recently with COVID-19, it dramatically affects the food supply. So these smaller independent processors are really important to stabilize the meat supply.
And you mentioned the term technical assistance before, and not all of our viewers are farmers or, in sort of ag in general. Can you just sort of describe what technical assistance to farmers means?
Yeah, it can mean a variety of things. It can be assistance or education on the production side, which might look like how to get more production out of your tomatoes, or how to more effectively move your chickens through your pasture, or rotate your cattle. We also do some business type training, and on the produce side, food safety trainings as well. So trying to provide the information that a farmer would need to come up to current standards of food safety.
Especially important right now, right?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so I mean, for the food safety aspect, it's been great that farmers have been working on this for the past several years with the Food Safety Modernization Act to modernize their farms, to get proper hygiene and equipment and protective gear. And so someone asked what we were doing differently. And we're already doing all the same things we do to keep people safe on a daily basis. The only things that have really changed is how we do drop-offs and things like that, to where we're not returning crates that have been touched and things like that.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of misconceptions around farmers. People think, okay, they grow crops, they raise animals, and that's all they do. But they have to have a lot of knowledge. I mean, having having a lot of knowledge around, the Food Safety and Modernization Act you just mentioned, and all of these other sort of requirements. It's a tough job, especially right now, because it's not just about food production and distribution and making sure that customers can eat. It's about knowing all these things that make food safe and healthy.
For sure. And especially with the changes that have happened in the marketplace, I've told people I think farming is one of the hardest jobs there is because you have to wear so many different hats. It's like
Right.
on this today I'm a plumber, and tomorrow I'm an electrician, and the next day I'm a PR specialist. And I'm so impressed with the farmers that I've had the pleasure of working with in Arkansas, that whenever all of this started to happen and farmers markets were shutting down, or farmers were losing restaurant accounts, how quickly they pivoted to online sales and distribution
Right.
and door delivery. And so it's amazing that they are expert horticulturalists and can identify insects, and then also know how to make a online digital sales platform
Right.
almost overnight. And so yeah, it's been really amazing to see how quickly farmers have responded to this.
Well, I feel the same way. We've been so inspired by how quickly farmers have set up, those online distribution systems, or shared resources, or figured out, ways to have drive-through farmers markets, which I've talked a lot about on this live cast, because I'm so impressed by that. I think that's so amazing, But it's because they had to, like all of us, figuring out ways to pivot. I think a crisis brings out a lot of ingenuity, especially in the farming community.
For sure. For sure.
So what are the farmers that you work with sort of most worried about right now?
I'd have to say, well, I guess first off, it depends on the scale of each of the farms. A lot of the vegetable farms that I know of and work with here in Arkansas are smaller to mid-scale farms. They don't utilize a lot of outside labor, or they have more direct consumer markets, and so they've been affected in a very different way than larger scale farms that are bringing in a lot of labor and selling to wholesale markets. Those have been a lot more disrupted, I think. The smaller scale farms that I'm working with have actually seen a rise in demand. They've had waiting lists on their CSAs. They've had people willing to wait in line for an hour at the farmers market just to get to their booth. And so, but they are having their challenge right now for the small scale farm is that they're going to be able to move their products, but they're having to work more hours to get it to the consumer.
Right.
So where they could just do a few restaurant drops, now they have to drive to 10 times more locations to drop off CSA boxes.
Yeah, that's a big burden, and something that requires a huge shift, and to keep oneself safe during this as well. I mean, that's another burden. How is Heifer and the ranch? How are you helping some of these farmers cope with these new challenges?
Yeah, so some of the things that we're doing right now, one is just keeping a line of communication. I'm talking with several farms throughout the week to just see what we can do, if there's things we can purchase together. So like that cooperative model of being able to make purchases of soil or packaging. I mean, that's been one of the big ones, is now all of a sudden a lot more stuff needs to be prepackaged.
Right.
So we can buy collectively. Still providing that technical assistance especially for the farms that are looking to scale up and breaking new ground just on the fly, because there is such demand, and they foresee that continuing. And then also backstopping some other farms. So as they get a CSA, we can be able to provide additional produce to that CSA and collaborate on that to help them mitigate their risk as they add more customers. And we're doing kind of the same thing for some of the restaurant accounts we've had. Some of the restaurants we have been selling to are now pivoting to become more of like an outdoor cafe with a marketplace. As people are more hesitant to go to a larger grocery store. Either one, they're not finding the products they need there, or two, they're just concerned with how many people are going through those doors, and a smaller marketplace might seem more safe to them. And so we've been working with restaurants to help make that transition too.
Yeah, so many transitions that need to be made. I like what you had to say about keeping, a better line of communication. We talked to folks from the National Young Farmers Coalition a couple weeks ago now, and they were saying that's such an important part of their work, keeping the lines of communication open. Talking to their farmers more, having sort of the ability to sort of discuss challenges and opportunities and share those resources over Zoom calls. I imagine that's a big part of your day now, and it probably wasn't before.
Yeah, and I'm very thankful for the technology that we have during this time to be able to use things like Zoom, or another app called Marco Polo. I've used that with a few farmers where I can say, this is what my tomatoes look like, and then they respond back with, well, mine look like this, and what are you doing here? And it's really easy to where we don't have to set up a meeting. We can just kind of go back and forth. So the technology aspect of being able to have a smartphone in your hand in the field has really helped like streamline that communication during this time.
Absolutely. I'm sort of interested in hearing your thoughts on recent policy and the federal stimulus package, and whether you think that will help the small and medium scale farmers that you work with, and the cooperatives that are so important to the food system in the United States.
I think that will really depend. I mean, we've kind of seen some issues with the PPP, stimulus, that it's kind of a first come, first serve, and companies that are more robust have more people to prepare the documents that they need.
Right.
There's also, as banks, we're giving out money for things like for paycheck protection. They want customers to already have a line of credit with them, and they may or may not have that. So the smaller scale farms are just going to struggle more to get access to that stimulus. And it's kind of the same thing that we saw with the trade war, and subsidies going to commodity crops and things like that. I can't speak with total knowledge of it, but I'm assuming that that's really what's going to happen with this as well, is that it's going to be more the large scale farms, and for I think the mid scale farms, and usually mid scale farms are kind of who get lost in all this shuffle.
Right, anyway. Those farms in the middle, yeah.
The smaller scale farms have the flexibility to pivot quickly and go to direct to consumer and maybe not lose any sales that year. Larger scale farms are super specialized and have very little, room to pivot, but have access to things like stimulus and subsidies. And it's the mid-scale farms that I think will really struggle in this.
Yeah, and that's a shame, because those are, they're an important part of rural America. They're an important part of the U.S. economy, and they need help. Any advice? I know you're not, policy is not your area of expertise probably, but what would you want from your local and state politicians right now? What sorts of services would you want them to invest more in, or provide more for their constituents, especially farmers?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that quite a bit, and I think one of the things I keep coming back to is, it feels like we really got in this mess because we have consolidated so much and we've industrialized so much, and now we're seeing this need to to have a more localized food system, and people, the general public is recognizing that the small local farmer is really significant to the stability of the food system and the support of the local economy. And it's interesting that this attention it took a pandemic to basically draw this attention, but it's a gong that a lot of people have been beating for a long time, like yourself, to say, we need to invest in this area. So I think there are some programs that are investing in infrastructure and land access for small scale farms. But I think one of the biggest things is that a lot of those programs are still pretty cumbersome. The Farm Service Agency loan program can be difficult to navigate for produce farmers, especially beginning produce farmers that don't already have contracts lined up and things like that. And when we look at how many small scale farms there are in Arkansas, it's really not enough to provide the current demand for produce. And so trying to figure out how to get more farms onto more land, I think is going to be really important. So I don't know that there's an immediate need from policymakers to inject cash into small scale farms in relation to the pandemic, as it was just as a whole to get more small scale farms started.
Absolutely. That's such a great point. We've been talking a lot in this country about how farmers are aging, and the average age of farmers is around 60 years old, according to the latest agricultural census. We need more young farmers. We need more people like yourself who are, interested in becoming part of the food system in different ways. I think that this crisis, as you pointed out before, has exposed the need for that and exposed a lot of different sort of cracks in the food system. How can we support, especially young farmers right now?
I think one way, like, it depends what you, I guess, have to offer. If you're a landowner and are in that older category of folks, being able to connect to a younger person that's interested in jumping into farming and has the experience but just lacks the land access, being able to lease land to a beginning farmer would be a huge asset.
Absolutely.
A lot of young farmers are looking for that. If you're a consumer, being able, just supporting beginning farmers, supporting the farmers market, CSAs, grocery store chains that buy local is a really big one. So like, even if you don't have time or it's not safe for you to get out and go to the farmers market, but you still have people that are buying from a big chain grocery store, calling the produce manager and saying, what do you have that's local? I think kind of putting that pressure is going to create market opportunities. And where there's market opportunities, there's places for people to enter and get started.
Absolutely. I know we had a question. I missed it on screen. I don't know if we can repost it. So, what can consumers do to better support these farmers during this time? Sean, that's a great question, right? I think, I think a lot of consumers are struggling. They're worried about where their food will come from. How can they support farmers like you?
Yeah, I think, being able to either go to the market, like we just kind of talked about, was like going to the market, asking your local produce manager to source more local. And here in Arkansas, the USDA and Extension have put together a website that has basically a map of where all you can buy local products, who's producing them, who's selling them, and that's a really helpful resource. We've actually found that while we've lost the restaurant accounts that we're working with, or they're pivoting to become markets, the small kind of mom and pop grocery store type businesses that are selling local products have seen a huge surge. We've been taking cases of strawberries in every couple of days to one of those grocers, Granville Market down the road, and people are practically gone before I get them out of the van. So there's been a lot of demand for these small scale, kind of smaller, more focused local product type grocers, and so supporting them is a big win for sustainable and small scale agriculture.
Absolutely. And I've been thinking about that a lot, the demand that has increased for small and medium sized farms to provide produce during this time. I think what worries me though is, 6 months from now, farmers don't like to take a lot of risks because that's why they like working with restaurants. They know they'll have a steady market, or they know that, how much they can sell at the farmers market each week. We're going to see some, I think, real highs and lows in demand over the next 6 to 18 months from small farmers. What are your thoughts on that? Because there'll be a period, I think, where we sort of, the surge of corona or COVID-19 cases, sort of levels off and people feel safe again, and maybe they start going back to grocery stores. I'm worried about what happens to farmers later on.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that can be most difficult to communicate to consumers and customers, is that in agriculture, there's such a lag time for things. I mean, especially for livestock, to raise a cow takes 2 years, but to raise the grass that makes the cow gain the weight in the time you need to takes a decade. And for produce too, I'm afraid there's going to be like a bit of a whiplash, as there's certain things, like we had a bunch of school accounts that now, where they were serving 2,000 meals a day, they're serving 500 meals a week.
Wow.
And that's, so we had whole blocks that were dedicated to meet the leafy greens demands of schools, and now all of a sudden we don't have that. So I've scaled back on that, but then if schools reopen in the fall, or I have another grocery chain that wants those leafy greens, but I've already stopped starting the seeds for them. So it's going to take some time, I think, for all that to level back out, I guess, and kind of this whiplash effect of, oh well, I couldn't sell that, so I'm just not going to grow that anymore. I'm going to till that under. I think it'll take a minute for all those supply chains to get worked out.
Absolutely, because they're already complex. One of the things that I've been thinking about, and one of the things that I appreciate about Heifer is this, a real focus around the globe on not just small scale farmers, but the innovations and practices that small scale farmers have developed, over generations, whether we're talking about, farmers in Malawi or farmers in Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you think that, because of COVID-19, there's a real opportunity to place more emphasis on those innovations and value them more. So we've talked a little bit about how consumers are realizing that small scale farms can sort of react to this crisis in different ways. But what about sort of learning from those innovations? Do you think that's something that both by going back and looking at some of those practices, do you think that this crisis will create that kind of opportunity?
I think so. I mean, that's one of the things that we do here at the ranch. Is we see ourselves as a working farm laboratory.
Right.
Where we're testing out new techniques and new technologies. We're working with Arkansas Innovation Hub to try and work on some new tools for market farmers. But a lot of these technologies are basically just remakes of things that were around in the 50s or prior to that, the 20s and the 30s. And we're just kind of modernizing them. But they've fallen out of favor when we moved towards chemical agriculture. And what we've seen too is there's kind of been this surge in market gardening in the past decade, and more young people trying to get into market gardening. It's a very efficient method to make a livelihood. And as a result of that, a lot of companies have popped up in the past 5 years or so that are making these specialized tools. So I think the demand for the produce will hopefully create demand for small scale farms. And then as a result, of necessity, there's going to be innovation, which will create new technologies and tools.
Absolutely. And I think there's a real opportunity for both high and low tech solutions. You already mentioned it, it's like combining digital technology and farmers selling online with some of these things that, their grandparents probably bought similar tools out of the Sears Roebuck, catalog in the 1930s. So I think it's just such an interesting time for agriculture. And, as Food Tank, we're kind of always looking for the bright spots. And I think that this crisis, exposes so many cracks in the current, food system, but also exposes all of these sorts of new innovations that are coming about and what farmers are doing on their own without government support or subsidies and just innovating and experimenting.
Yeah. There's been there's so many Facebook groups that I'm a part of that are just full of farmers saying, hey, I put this tool together and this is what it's doing. This is what, it works or it doesn't work. And then people comment with, hey, you could try this or do this. And that is really, probably the silver lining to this is how much innovation is going to come out of it.
Right.
And that it really is a grassroots movement of just interconnectedness of small scale sustainable farmers. That there isn't, a government agency pushing people together and funding certain things. It's very much bootstraps. And I love that aspect of it.
I do too. I also think that the federal government should support y'all more, but I think that's going to eventually be needed no matter what. I want you to talk a little bit about before we went online, we were talking about beekeeping, and there's a global decline in pollinators around the globe, and so I want you to talk a little bit about why. I used to beekeep in my early 20s. I loved it. It's an amazing way to sort of get close to nature and really understand how agriculture systems work and how, bees themselves sort of organize. Can you talk about beekeeping and why it's important to you?
Yeah, I actually got into beekeeping in Houston, Texas, because I wanted to get into farming and couldn't find land. So I figured I would just raise livestock on my roof. So I had 30 beehives on top of my roof
Nice.
in Houston, and that was what got me started. Um, Before I was doing farming in agriculture, I was a environmental scientist, and before that, I was a wetland biologist. Um, so working with nature in concert with agriculture has always been an interest of mine,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and that's what we try and practice here at the ranch. So it's not just honeybees, that need support. It's they're kind of a indicator species of the health of an ecosystem and how the native species are doing. There's over 3,000 species of native bees to North America, which honeybees are not native to North America. So kind of the health of the honeybee can be an indicator of how these other species are doing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I'm really excited about what we're doing at the ranch is this idea, this paradigm that we have of holistic management and regenerative agriculture. So we're wanting to raise livestock and vegetables in a way that not only doesn't hurt the planet, but actually improves the biodiversity on our land. And so that's really exciting, especially as a biologist, to be part of that kind of system. And what we're really excited to see, Donna Kilpatrick, who's our livestock manager, just seeded a 12-way cover crop or no-till seed drill into our pastures to get some more natives and blooming plants.
Nice.
We're not cutting hay the way that we used to, 3 times a year, and just every time something blooms or goes to seed, you cut hay, or before it does. And so I'm really interested to see if we actually have a boost in our honey production because we're rotationally grazing our cattle and not cutting hay all the time, and really improving the diversity in our pastures. So it'll be interesting to see if better beef makes for better honey.
That's so great. I love the interconnectedness. And I think
Yeah.
that's also, you make a really good point that, like, COVID-19 is this, massive emergency right now, but there are all of these other issues that are still very pertinent for small and large scale farmers all over the world, whether it's around climate change or the loss of pollinators. So we
Mhm.
need to keep these things, we can't forget them, during the emergency. These are things that we still need to grapple with. And I'm so glad that the Heifer Ranch and you are experimenting and trying all of these things out. It's more important than ever before.
Yeah, and it's more important ever to be eating healthy too. I mean, that was one of the things that the CDC had come out. That studies were finding that hypertension and diabetes and obesity were connected to mortality and morbidity from COVID. So eating healthy now is pretty much is more important than it has ever been. And so yeah, so that yet another reason to buy fresh and buy local produce.
Absolutely. We need to keep those diet related illnesses down, keep our immunity up, and make sure that we're all supporting as many of our local and regional farmers as possible. To find out more information, folks can go to heifer.org. They can go to heifer.org/USA/heifer-ranch to find out more about the ranch. There's probably an easier way to get there than I just described. Before we say goodbye, Sean, I want to ask you who's inspiring you the most right now in Arkansas?
Oh man. I'd have to say collectively the farmers that we work with. There's probably 30, and I can't list them all right now, but just seeing how quickly they've navigated this, as well as the cooperatives, New South and Memphis, and the Food Conservancy in Northwest Arkansas, have teams of people that are just working diligently to try and re-navigate and kind of restructure how food is moving around the state, and they're working tirelessly to get people fed and support small scale farms.
Sorry, there was a little bit of a tech difficulty on my side, but I love that you keep emphasizing farmers and how well they're navigating the situation and how much more they need to do. Thanks so much for joining me today, Sean. I really, really appreciate it. I hope everyone will listen to this as well in our podcast, Food Talk with Danny Nierenberg. And I hope everyone will join me back here at 5 p.m. Eastern Time when I'll be talking to Ben Lilliston of the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy. Please stay well, Sean, and give my best to all of your colleagues.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great talking with you.
Thank you, you too. Bye.